So today I'm going to interview Shaw and Polly Fulton. So really simple questions. How did you get to Clarksville Highway?
Born and raised here. I was part of the families that came together and started Clarksville Highway Church of Christ.
So when Mr. Robert and Mr. Carl, and I think it was John Hampton, is that right? So the date, I better not ask that question because that's going to really mess up. Because it said 1959.
Oh, 59.
And so they started meeting in it was 1960. They started meeting in 1961. So how old would you have been? How old were you when they started this church?
4 or 5.
4 or 5, okay. All right. So
Barely remember it. I remember a little bit of Pleasant View because we were supposedly been like a seed church off of Pleasant View Church of Christ. They wanted one in the Pinnacle community.
okay.
And I remember coming up with my daddy after he would get off work and all the men would come up and work on the old Pinnacle schoolhouse. Sometimes we'd get to come with them.
Did you ever participate in one of the great snowball fights?
Always. Mhm.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Wow, what a memory.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah.
That's cool.
I remember even after church was over, it set back further. Like the new church, the church there now is set out front of the old church. And there was a security light. Of course, everybody was standing around and talk after church for the longest. And us kids would get bored, so we would take the gravel and throw it at the light and watch the bats come to try to get the gravel. But that's what I remember, throwing the rocks at the bats.
That's good. So, Shaw, how did you get here?
I married her. That's honestly how I got here. David Hunter was preacher then,
Mm-hmm.
and we had begun dating, and she asked if I'd like to come to church here, and I said sure. I was going to Madison Street in Clarksville at that time, and I started coming up here, and I've been here ever since.
Okay. So, I mean, I can ask this on camera. If I can't, we'll cut it out. That's what I kept telling Miss Peggy, but I never cut any of it out. How did you meet?
At FedEx.
Okay.
The way I remember it, and then she can correct me as we go, I was working in Clarksville, she was working in Nashville, but on the weekends I had to go
Shuttle the freight up
shuttle the freight up,
to our
and
place.
so we met, and it just kind of went from there. It wasn't one of those quick things that we knew. We just had to get to know one another, and then I think one day.
And I would go and help them. They didn't have customer service agent is what I was. Someone that worked in the office, and they didn't have one there because they weren't in counter operations. So I would go up and help them some during busy season. And we just all became friends. Everybody there.
Yeah.
Just became friends. And
I was what you call domiciled in Clarksville at that time. We didn't have a place, and then we got a place, and we still didn't have agents. But that's how we met.
Okay. See, I'm learning all kinds of stuff.
and they came and looked at our pumpkin.
She invited me up to look at the pumpkin, and I did. That's why I drove up here and looked at the pumpkin, turned around, and went back home.
Brandy and I had carved a really nice jack-o'-lantern that year for Halloween, and we had gotten him a little piece of chocolate, and he drove all the way from Clarksville to Morriswood, got out, looked at the pumpkin. We stood there and talked for a few minutes. Brandy handed him his little chocolate, and he went home. He never came in. He just went home. It was so okay. And there it started.
Do you have a picture of the pumpkin?
I don't know. Probably not.
Probably
Okay.
not.
I thought if you had a picture of the pumpkin, we'd get it in the video. So.
No. Probably not.
I didn't meet Brandon until
We held off on that.
I met Brandon. We went to eat at a Pizza Hut, I think,
Mhm.
in Clarksville. We were dating by then, and I met Brandon. He walked in, and I said something, and he said something like, "I like him."
Yeah.
I don't remember what it was I said, but
It was fun.
So Polly, as you grew up, do you remember your parents, did they always go to church?
Always. 3 times a week. Always.
Okay. Did, and I don't know this, so before Clarksville Highway, they went to Pleasant View. I know Mr. Robert did, cause I heard the story. How about before Pleasant View, did he go anywhere? Do you know? Did he always grow up going to church? Do you know?
His mother they were Methodists. And
some of his sisters also
some,
are.
some of his sisters, and then some of his sisters are Church of Christ. And but as far back as I do, I remember them always. He's always been church affiliated.
All right. And so Shelley, your journey was a little different than that.
A little. Church was in my family, but my oldest sister is 21 years older than I am. Then I had a middle sister who was 10 years younger than her. Then another sister that was 10 years younger. And I'm 10 years even later. So I think I got that right. Something like that. But anyhow, they all went out on their own. I was like an only child. My family never went to church. My dad, I don't think, ever darkened the door of a church building. My religious upbringing, my oldest sister was a practicing Roman Catholic at that time, and I went with her, and I never could figure out when to kneel and when to stand up or whatever. My middle sister was a Methodist, so I went with them, and I could figure out how to kneel. And my youngest sister is a Baptist, and I became a member of the Church of Christ. It's different, I know, but that's what happened.
So why did you decide to go to Hardy Graduate School?
The graduate school or university?
Both.
Well, that's sort of a lengthy story, but when I graduated from high school and I immediately enrolled at Austin Peay, and I did very well in classes, everything was going fine. I was dating a young lady, we were planning on getting married, and then life happened, and I had what I think was a stroke. I began to question everything, and this lady's brother, whose name was David Anderson, began to tell me about Jesus. I listened to what he said and was baptized. I still have the sheet of paper. I used to carry it with me in my billfold. I don't any longer, but I still have the sheet of paper that he wrote to me after I was baptized. I have an insatiable reading appetite. I think Polly would agree with that. Well, I was that way too when I wanted to learn about the churches of Christ, so I went to every gospel meeting, everything I could think of. Tulsa, we've talked about that several times. I just drank in everything I could drink. And I guess it was the Lord who laid it on my heart that I didn't need to pursue my degree in philosophy and psychology. I needed to pursue a degree in Bible to get to know the Bible. So I went to Harding and spent 2.5 years there, got my degree in Bible and biblical languages. And then I went to the grad school. That's when I came in contact with FedEx because I was working at night. They paid for part of my tuition, and I didn't finish grad school, like a year, but I didn't finish. And my mother got sick and I came home, and that's what began us. I know that's a long way to roundabout to tell you what's going on, but that's what happened.
Well, it's not a long way around, and I think people will be interested in that because, I mean, when you think about our church from a biblical perspective, you're one of the most highly educated. I mean, people recognize you as a Bible scholar, and they value and appreciate your opinion when you talk about the text, and they know that you're a deep reader and a deep thinker. And I just kind of wondered what created that desire for you to go down that path and go through that process?
I think part of it, honestly, was I've always felt like I'm a little bit behind. I still feel that way 40-something years into this. I still feel like I'm behind most of the members of the church. And I've told Polly this before because she had it from the time she was born. I didn't, and it's always trying to play catch up. It's okay. I don't have any jealousy about it, but that's why I am where I am. I'm sure there's still that, even in our elders meetings. Sometimes I think these men sitting around me have more Bible knowledge than I could ever hope to have. So I've got to study harder. That's who I am and why I am, I think.
So if you were going to give advice to people at Clarksville Highway, what would it be? Would you have any?
We're family. We're home. If you've been through an illness or a time when you couldn't come, it's like coming home.
And she speaks from experience there. She's gone through 2 bouts of breast cancer, and there was a long period of time when she was unable to come.
And I was thankful to be able to watch it. But it's nothing like coming home. It's nothing like coming back, and you just need the fellowship. You need the voices around you. You need it's just home. You gotta be there.
I agree. That would be my answer too, in a little different way. It does feel like home. You know, I've been to bigger congregations and other congregations and congregations that do things differently, but this is always home to me. And it's, Paul and I've said this, it's where we'll be till they put us under, unless the church decides not to exist anymore, but this is where we'll be, so.
And can I back up to where when we came from Pleasant View, and that was, you know, that was a good thing. It was needed into this community. Pleasant View was it was a small church also. And cleaning out when Mom and Dad passed away, I found where Mother had written down, everybody in the community and in just this area had donated money to help start the church at Pinnacle. And it was from families I know that were struggling just like everybody was. But to find that, and that meant so much, that it was so welcomed. And I think it's still a very welcoming church.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that you said Pinnacle, because I've always wondered why they didn't call it the Pinnacle Church of Christ. I think I understand, because at the time it was on the highway that went to Clarksville, unless you're going that way, went to Nashville. But it was Clarksville Highway, but then they built the interstate. And now when you tell people Clarksville Highway, a lot of people ask where in Clarksville we are. And I'm like, well, we're not in Clarksville. We're just on Clarksville Highway. And I've always wondered, or instead just call it Pinnacle.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, but most churches of Christ, if you look at their name, it's got where they're located. So
It's either
I
a
think
street or a highway.
yeah, I think that's why we are where we are.
Yeah. I think
It'd be
so.
fine with me to change the name to Pinnacle, but I like that. Not that it sets us above anybody, but we're kind of sitting on the hill. So.
Yeah. So do you have a favorite verse?
Mine's John 3:16, because I learned it in that Pinnacle Church. Miss Gloria Chambliss, Miss Oline Atkins was my teachers, and John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not die but have everlasting life. And when I was telling Holly about, that we were going to do this interview and he was going to ask me, and she pipes up before he even got a chance, John 3:16, Nani, that's my favorite verse. I says, well, it's mine too, from a little child. But then it has a whole different meaning than it did as a little child to know that he gave his only son just so we can be with him forever. It's a simple verse, but it has such deep meaning. Deep meaning.
See why I love
I do.
Your turn.
her. I came to my favorite verse a little differently. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jimmy Allen.
Mhm.
I was taking a Jimmy Allen Romans class, and I breezed through the first 8 chapters. Understood, I think, what Paul was trying to say. I got chapters 9, 10, 11. I had to learn a lot about Jewish stuff that I didn't know anything about. And I remember taking a test, and I made an 85. That's as low as a test as I ever made in a Jimmy Allen class. But I remember taking that test, and I thought, I've got to do something with this. Well, I was reading through the text, and I got to chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And I saw Jimmy Allen stand before me. I knew what he had been through, and I thought, that is where my life is going to be for the remainder of my life. So Romans 12, 1 and 2 is my life verse, my favorite verse, or actually the entire chapter of chapter 12 is one of my favorite chapters, but we had to memorize that thing and write it out. You don't need me to quote it, but I will if you want me to, but it's Romans 12, 1 and 2.
Okay, good. Is there anything else you'd like to tell people at Clarksville Highway?
No, we good.
I want to pick up on something Polly said earlier, and she may have some more to say with this too. One of the things that I think is an identifying mark of the church is the love for each other. And we've had some problems here, just like any church would. But the love that exists between the people there is palpable, I think. And it probably has to do from whence it came. I mean, from the very origins of Clarksville Highway, because I've heard those stories from Robert and Grace and Joe and Peggy and all those people about how they used to meet and do things in people's homes, and they grew to love one another. And I think that's still true. I just wish it was even more. So.
All right. Well, thanks for the interview.
You're welcome.
All right. Wave hi to everybody.